Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Monday, November 17th, 2025. As funding falters, young brain scientists rethink careers in research. A decades-long boom in brain science in the United States may be heading for a bust. Ongoing disruptions in federal funding are causing many young brain scientists to reconsider their career choice. According to leaders of the Society for Neuroscience, which represents more than 37,000 researchers and clinicians. If those scientists change fields or leave the country, SFN officials say it could hobble the nation's efforts to understand and treat brain disorders, including Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's, and schizophrenia. The U.S. has been a world leader in research for decades, and that leadership position is now at risk, says John Morrison, a professor at the University of California, Davis, and president of SFN. Morrison expects that discussion about federal funding are likely to have prominent place in the group's annual 5-day meeting, which begins Saturday in San Diego and is expected to attract about 20,000 brain scientists. It's hard to escape because we're all being directly affected by it, Morrison says. Science disrupted. In the months since President Trump took office, the National Institutes of Health and National Science Foundation have been buffeted by cuts. Grant terminations, and abrupt policy changes. Federal health officials have said those measures reflect an effort to reduce fraud and waste, in support of woke science and align research with the administration's priorities. But the process has been unsettling for young research scientists like Claire Zundel, a postdoctoral researcher at Wayne State University in Detroit. Zundel, who studies how pollution affects the developing brain, currently has funding from the National Institute of Health, but consideration of an NIH grant that would extend her funding has been delayed, she says. As a result, she has decided not to spend money to attend this year's neuroscience meeting. Instead, she's focusing on finding a job in an increasingly tight market. Many universities are still on partial or even full hiring freezes, Zundel says. So it's just made it really scary to think how I'm going to take that next step. Zundel isn't ready to abandon her career plans just yet. I absolutely love what I do. She says, still, talk to me in another 3 months, she says, and I might change my mind. Other young researchers are even less certain, Morrison says. You hear things like, I've prepared my whole life for this. Is it gone now? Is it no longer possible to be the scientist I always wanted to be? He says. Many will just choose something else. Others may take their research to another country, and if finding cuts and uncertainty persist, Morrison says, the field of neuroscience could lose a whole generation of scientists. Congress funds White House cuts. The NIH often awards 5-year grants, and scientists tend to structure their research around that timeline. But in recent months, many grants have been paused or prematurely terminated. If you disrupt the grants in the middle, the work you've already done may be worthless, Morrison says. He also challenges the administration's claim that it is saving taxpayers' money. In the long run, he says, the human and financial cost of cutting research will be huge. Take Alzheimer's research. If the neurodegenerative disorder costs the federal government a few $billions per year, Morrison says, but caring for people with the disease costs far more, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And that cost, he says, will continue to rise until researchers find better treatments or a way to prevent the disease. Morrison says it's an excellent example of a principle expressed by the late Mary Lasker, a philanthropist and champion of medical research, who famously said, if you think research is expensive, try disease. That sentiment is one reason brain science has long enjoyed bipartisan support in Congress. Says Deanne Lipscomb, a professor at Brown University and chair of the Government and Public Affairs Committee at the Society for Neuroscience. Another is that ever since World War II, science has been a huge boost to the U.S. economy. She says that's because publicly funded research not only helps train future physicians and scientists, it leads to new drugs and medical devices, biotech companies, and that spin off from universities, and patents on vaccines, cancer treatments, and even gene editing technology. I don't agree that we've ever talked to anyone in the United States or Senate who disagreed with that. Lipscomb says, but the current round of cuts and disruptions have come from the executive branch, not Congress. So neuroscientists are taking their case directly to the public. The Society's website, for example, now includes links to videos of scientists explaining the work they do and why it matters. Lipscomb thinks that message will be heard. So when she talks to young scientists asking for career advice, she tries to offer an optimistic message. You just have to stay with what you love because things will get better, she says. At least that's the hope. Toxic waste, bacteria to the rescue. In H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, invaders from Mars crushed the most powerful weapons the panicked human race could throw at them, and were on the brink of total conquest when they were wiped out by the humblest of earthly organisms, bacteria. Now, bacteria are being embraced as potentially potent allies in a more realistic battle against a growing number of hazardous wastes in soil and water. Using bacteria and other microbial forms of life, like fungi, for cleanups, a technique known as bioremediation, is actually an old practice. Bacteria have been used to process sewage in municipal plants for nearly a century. Industrial plants and food processors have also used them in increasing quantities during the last 20 years to reduce the amount of organic pollutants they dump into rivers or sewer systems. In the last few years, however, an explosion in research on the astonishingly diverse world of microbes and a growing awareness of the costs and limitations of other waste disposal technologies have nudged bioremediation beyond its historic niches. Devouring an oil spill. In Alaska, fertilizers were applied to some beaches to encourage native microorganisms to devour the oil spilled by the Exxon Valdez in March 1989. The Megaborg accident of the Gulf of Mexico this month marked the first time laboratory-grown bacteria were applied to an oil spill. Alpha Environmental Inc., a 5-year-old Austin, Texas company that supplied the bacteria, says it's still awaiting word on the results. But the progress that most impresses waste engineers has been in more mundane cleanups. Bioremediation has been applied at numerous sites where petroleum products, pesticides, chemicals, and used to preserve wood and other toxic substances have dripped or been dumped. Bacteria are also used in oil wells to break up paraffins and other materials that clog production as wells age. Others are sold to restaurants to consume grease and substances that cause odors. Researchers have discovered that certain species of bacteria can even attack metals, inorganic chemicals, and compounds containing chlorine. Wastes, once deemed impossible targets for bioremediation, it has become accepted as possible option for many problems, says Richard Sloan, a manager of the special projects for the Arco Chemical Company. Mr. Sloan has overseen the French LTD project in Texas. The first program approved by the Environmental Protection Agency to demonstrate the ability of bacteria to cleanse major hazardous waste disposal sites without removing soil or water. Revenues are still measured in the millions rather than tens of millions for most bioremediation companies. But industry participants estimate that more than 200 companies are in the business. That includes units of giant chemical concerns like DuPont Environmental Services, Inc., as well as a number of startups backed by venture capital. Industry participants say that bioremediation can be only 1/10 as expensive as incineration, which is regarded as the surest way to destroy most wastes. But bioremediation frequently has to be combined with other techniques. Including incineration, vacuuming, chemical treatments, pumping, and soil removal of clean hazardous waste sites completely. Simply determining what is at a site and how much can be done by bioremediation is a major challenge. Easy to make claims. This is a natural for the sake oil salesman, says Peter Johnson, who has studied bioremediation for the Office of Technology Assessment, an arm of Congress. It's easy to make claims, and it's difficult to construct a scientific experiment good enough to prove or disprove them. In the long run, microbes may be widely used to prevent pollution. For example, there are widespread experiments with bacteria that absorb some of the sulfur in coal. They may provide a simple way to make coal cleaner before it is burned. Other bacteria convert coal into methane, which might provide a low-cost, albeit slow, way to produce energy-rich gas. Both methods could reduce the risks of acid rain. Currently, though, the EPA sees bioremediation as the best hope for cleaning up many hazardous waste sites without transporting material away from them. It may be a especially useful method for dealing with polluted groundwater or land under buildings that remain in use. Nevertheless, regulators have moved slowly because of the public fears about bioremediation. Conflicting messages. The EPA sends very conflicting messages, said Keith Kaufman, president of the year-old Applied Biotreatment Association and Washington Trade Group. The public fears stem in part of the connection between bioremediation and genetic engineering. The thought of releasing artificial bacteria has never been popular. Just that possibility has emphasized in the 1970s by highly publicized legal battles over whether new organisms created in laboratory by gene splicing could be patented. The microbe at the center of the 1980 Supreme Court case that settled the issue in favor of patentability was a hydrocarbon-eating bacterium created by Ananda Chakrabarty, then a researcher for the General Electric Company. Mr. Chakrabarty's microbe performed too poorly to have any commercial value, so the question of releasing never arose. The focus in bioremediation remains on naturally occurring microbes. The goal is to find those species that consume or break down undesirable substances, and then figure out how to make them flourish. Usually that means finding ways to get more oxygen and nutrients to the microbes. Challenges remain. Microbes with a taste for toxic chemicals are surprisingly easy to find. Most hazardous waste sites have plenty of them. But the next steps are often challenging. Bacterial populations can be disrupted by changes in weather, the chemical environment in which they live in, and because many live off byproducts created by other microbes by changes in their neighborhoods. In contrast to public fears, that bacteria will suddenly start consuming the wrong things or spread to consume oil supplies. In addition to spills, the constant concern of those in the industry is that the bacterial populations deployed in cleanups will die out of work too slowly to be useful. Moreover, many of the hazardous wastes that are candidates for bioremediation are complicated. There are, for instance, more than 200 forms of polychlorinated biphenyls or PCBs, that were once widely used in the power industry. By manufacturers and by railroads. More than 100 types of PCBs show up mixed in a typical waste site, according to researchers at Generic Electric. PCBs are destroyed by both aerobic, oxygen-breathing, and anaerobic, not-breathing oxygen microbes, but in different ways and with different bacteria preferring different PCBs. Some mysteries. GE, which has become a leader in bioremediation research, says many fundamental questions remain, including why the bacteria contain genes to make an enzyme that attacks PCBs. Unlike oil, PCBs are too new for bacteria to have evolved to make an enzyme that attacks PCBs. Unlike oil, PCBs are too new for bacteria to have evolved methods to utilize them for energy. The link between bioremediation and hydrocarbons is more natural but not necessarily more straightforward. Crude oil has over 30,000 molecules in it, said Dr. Michael Nelson, senior microbiologist for the Ecova Corporation, a Redmond wash remediation company. That's a very complex matrix to attack. So far, cleanup companies have been far more successful in finding bacteria with a lusty appetite for light oil products, like diesel fuel, than for heavier oils. In most cases, even those bacteria that consume a range of hydrocarbons will go for the light oils first. Marjorie Taylor Greene says Trump policies are not America first in fight over MAGA. President Trump arrives after being greeted by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to address a joint session of Congress at the Capitol in Washington on March 4th. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, once one of President Trump's strongest supporters in Congress, called his foreign policies not America first positions, and said his recent attacks against her can put my life in danger. Greene and Trump have traded barbs in last few days over the future of the Make America Great Again movement, raising new questions about the president's firm grip on the Republican Party. On Friday, Trump withdrew his endorsement of the Georgia lawmaker, calling her wacky and claiming Greene's recent criticism was all about his refusal to support her future political ambitions. On Saturday, Trump called her a traitor in a social media post. He called me a traitor, and that is so extremely wrong. Greene said during an interview on the CNN State of the Union with Dana Bash on Sunday. And those were the types of words used that can radicalize people against me and put my life in danger. When asked about her previous attacks against political opponents, such as in 2020 when she posted an image of a gun alongside a group of progressive Democratic Congresswomen. Green apologized. "I think that's fair criticism," Green said, "and I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country." During the extensive interview, Green also criticized Trump's recent defense of the H-1B visa program, which lets companies sponsor foreign-born workers for skilled labor. During a Tuesday Fox News interview, Trump said the U.S. has to bring this talent, and he said the country doesn't have enough of it. Those are not America First positions, Green said on Sunday, before voicing displeasure for his frequent foreign trips. And continuing to really travel all over the world doesn't help Americans back at home. I said this to him, and I will say it out loud, I would love to see Air Force One be parked and stay home. Despite her break with Trump, local GOP leadership in Georgia's 14th congressional district are standing with Green. Recent national criticism directed at Congresswoman Green does not change the fundamental truth that she serves at the direction of the people of the district. Chairman Jim Tully posted on Facebook Saturday, "While the President of the United States represents a nation as a whole, Congresswoman Green represents the people of Northwest Georgia." And she has done so with clarity, resolve, and integrity. This public rift between Green and Trump marks a brewing fissure in the GOP. When asked what caused the break, Green pointed to the battle over releasing documents tied to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. "Unfortunately, it has all come down to the Epstein files, and that is shocking," Green said. The Georgia lawmaker said she doesn't believe Trump is implicated in these files. The House of Representatives is set to vote on the release of the documents related to investigations of Epstein this week, after enough members signed a discharge petition brought by Representative Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. On ABC News Sunday, Massie warned his fellow Republicans that voting against the release of the files would stain their long-term political futures, even if Trump attacks them in the short term. In 2030, he's not going to be president, and you will have voted to protect pedophiles, Massie said. The record of this vote will last longer than Donald Trump's presidency.